Good morning. Good morning. Um, it's been a while. I'm back. I was a bit MIA for a little over a week. I had to head over to seminary for some intensive courses for a week, and just before that started, I got sick as a dog. So I spent half my days in classes, and then the other half in bed trying to recover. Got back to Chicago on Friday, spend some time with family, continue to recover. So I'm trying to play catch up. Plan to be doing these live streams and let's chats more often. A few other people I've seen have done some videos. Father Eric, um, that's been cool. Love to see it. Want to see more. So yeah, that's just what I've been up to. If people have been wondering, um, so yeah, anyone want to chat? You're welcome to jump in the comments. Welcome to jump on. I believe I've shared the link how to jump on if you're interested. And if you'd like to take any comments, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, I will continue doing other work until somebody gives me something to respond to. Do I participate in voices? I used, excuse me, I used to participate in CRC voices. Um, I kind of got a bit annoyed by it. I still follow it. Like some of the forums, I get them sent to my email every day. I look at some of them, I get annoyed, and then look away. Um, so I'm still on that platform. I don't really contribute because it could really suck me in. And to be honest, my way of communicating, especially via like that type of forum, is probably a bit too harsh for many of the other people who are participate in that forum to be able to handle. So yeah, I don't really contribute much, but I do follow it a bit. I'm curious, Phoebus, are you on Voices at all? As a lurker or contributor? I'm curious as to which one your brother might be. I've been Like I said, I keep tabs on it pretty regularly. Um, I'm also curious as to if you get as annoyed by some of the conversation as I do. Yes, 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 I've noticed that. He is annoying he's annoying some of the people who don't typically get annoyed, which is kind of funny. Thank you, Jacob. Happy Purim to you as well. Yeah, I'm interested to see how it may potentially shift once the whole HSR thing and the CRC starts to get wrapped up a bit. I know right now for a lot of the affirming folks within the denomination, there's still hope that what was done this past summer will be undone. I don't suspect that will happen, but because they still have that hope, there's still a lot of pushing towards that end. Once hope is gone, I wonder if the conversation will move into different areas. Because that's kind of all they talk about right now is uh same-sex attraction and marriage and all that stuff. It's very rarely do they get into anything else. And if anybody mentions anything else, it doesn't really take off as a conversation. At least not that I've seen. I'm pretty sure that I would agree with that statement, Jacob. The tricky part is figuring out, okay, how to redirect people like that in ways, you know, is there hope for people to possibly see past their delusions or not, and then how do you deal with them at that point? Hi, Nechama. Yes, I'm feeling better. Thank you. Happy Purim. Um, I'm not that familiar with that. So if anyone would like to explain a bit more about what that is, that would help me out. Yeah, the interesting thing about voice is it seems like there's a lot of people on there trying to like communicate, hey, we should listen to one another, but it doesn't really seem like anybody is trying that, or some of the people just seem to be too nice all the time, right? And so that becomes, it encourages people that sometimes ought not to be encouraged, but then you end up overlooking guys like Richard, who has, I mean, not only does he have some of his struggles, which are interesting to think about and respond to and wrestle with, but uh, some of his thought processes and approaches to things, I think, are remarkable for somebody his age. And so that's been really cool. And yeah, the fact that it doesn't really get responded to outside of just niceties every now and then is a bit problematic. Jewish holiday of getting drunk. Oh, hmm. That sounds cool. CRC Voices is like an online forum. It's like it's very old school forum, and I think it's like 25 years old. So it's basically a bunch of people that are either were part of the Christian Reformed Church or are kind of loosely connected, and they kind of talk mainly. It seems like they talk about a lot of relevant issues within the Christian Reformed Church, and so it's interesting when people outside of it jump on, and are like really dogmatic about what the CRC ought to be, and I'm like, okay, listserv, yeah, it's a listserv. I'm also a little bit too young to fully understand what that is, but I was invited onto it by an older guy, from this little corner who happens to go to my church. And then, ironically enough, he got annoyed by it and doesn't get on there anymore just because it was kind of making him too upset. But he doesn't even follow it, I don't believe anymore. Yeah, and there's a few people that it's like they were part of the CRC and aren't anymore, but still have opinions. To a certain degree, that doesn't necessarily bother me, but you get some people that like actually like aren't vested at all, don't necessarily, it doesn't seem like they care about it as a but really want to speak in like their wisdom, like, hey, take my advice on this. And I'm like, you want to have skin in the game, come on, let's go. And there's a variety of reasons for leaving the CRC, right? Like some people leave because they don't like what the CRC teaches, or there's some issues with the denomination of itself. Some people leave because they married somebody, or they moved to a location where there really aren't any CRC. There's a variety of reasons to leave. So there are some people who are not connected but still love it. I'm cool. There's some people who still have, like you, a lot of family connections. Okay, um, that's fine. But like some of the people that don't seem to have any vested interest outside of maybe trolling or something like that. And I feel like the CRC is dealing with a lot of complex issues at once. One is the whole sexuality issue, but then they're also trying to figure out who they are outside of Dutchness, um, because you are getting more non-Dutch people involved in it as a denomination. Um, some people, or most people, view that as a good thing. I don't know that I've encountered anyone within the denomination that sees that as a bad thing. Um, but as to why that's a good thing, I think that's where there's probably a lot of disagreement. Reverse Uno the Persians. I like that term. That's probably something good to celebrate. Okay, so I know the story of Esther, so that's very helpful. Yeah, so I've heard. So my wife is Canadian or Dutch Canadian, um, and on her mom's side, they came over recently, like, after World War II. So I do see that as a significant difference. I was actually at Grand Rapids last week and met several other um, Canadian CRC peeps. Interesting. Obviously, was a bunch from like the Toronto area, and then there was a few in like the Alberta area, and you know, even all the Canadians aren't quite on the same page with what they'd like to see. What kind of costumes would they dress up in? Would they be like biblical costumes, or are they free to be more creative? It's probably smart. I don't think I've ever gone shopping for a costume. I've always been very big on if I'm going to dress up, using what I have and making some kind of costume. I think I've done some fairly clever costumes. Well, and it's funny within like the Protestant evangelical world that tends to try to be conservative. I used to do a lot of like over the top costumes when I was younger. Like one year, the 300 was really popular, so I went as King Leonidas, which is pretty much I went to this church Halloween party. I was just wearing a pair of underwear, sandals, and I took a red bed sheet as like the cape, and then I took a Sharpie and I like drew all the muscles all over me. Freaked out a lot of people. I thought I looked amazing though. I wonder if I have any pictures of. I don't have any pictures of that one. Let's see. Yeah, and you know what? Some people weren't totally sure that they were Sharpie muscles because I mean, I'm relatively thin, and at that time I was actually even skinnier, and so they're like, "Oh, are your abs really that defined?" And they weren't. I didn't really have very great abs, but it ended up being a fun little gag. People ask me, "Who's the guy dressed up?" Uncle Sam reading a scroll in Hebrew. Sounds pretty epic. I also went one year as Baby Blanket. You know, when Michael Jackson, held his baby over the rail, and it was this big controversy, and they had the blanket over his head. That was a costume that I made from home one year. I thought it was clever. I'm looking to see if I can find any pictures of my old Halloween costumes. Good morning, Chad. All is better now. It's been a rough couple of weeks because last week I was sick, but the week before all my kids were sick, and so sometimes it doesn't even matter if it's me or them. Like it's hard to get anything done, and you don't sleep well either. Ooh, this might be a fun picture. Let's see. Can I download this? I'm going through my Facebook pictures. Where is this? All right. So I have this picture now. Let's see. I present something. Let's see if I can figure this out. Okay, let's see if I do something like this. What's this? Oh, I don't want to share screen. Oh, maybe I could share screen. If I share screen. No, that won't work. But there's new Cardi B offset meal at McDonald's. So I've heard this mentioned before, but I haven't seen any of the advertisements, or obviously I haven't tried the meal. Um, I think it's weird though that that McDonald's would want to work with Cardi B. I mean, I've always felt like McDonald's is typically trying to target kids. Any thoughts on Roger Waters re-recording The Dark Side of the Moon? Um, Now that I'm thinking about it, I hadn't heard that he was doing that. I've often gone back and listened to my music that I've recorded before and thought, "Oh man, this would be cool if I added this." And so it's one of those things. I don't necessarily. I'd be interested to hear it and see if what what he might wish to modify. The other thing is whenever you're recording an album, right, you are recording it with your band, but then you also have a producer typically involved. It's kind of like saying, "Hey, maybe try playing this here." And so what would it be like to do some of the same songs maybe with a different producer? Um yeah, I would find that very interesting. Let's see here. What if I do? Ooh, that's a good question. Is the art still your art? I actually have thought about this a bit, oddly enough, with the Harry Potter series, right? So you have your main seven books, right, in the Harry Potter world, and then afterwards, Rowling has added details that she likes. Do I have to care about what she adds after it? Um, I don't. Um, so I take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, is the art still yours? Like, if he re-records that album, what's the necessary connection to the original? Um, yeah, I mean, obviously in the music world, no, right? Because there's often a studio involved. And this is the big thing when you don't own the rights to your own music. To a certain degree, it's not really yours anymore. Or if you write music, there's a big thing. I was with two different bands. Whose music is it? Who gets to utilize the music? Can I utilize if I wrote the music and somebody else brought the lyrics? Can I reuse that musical and add different vocals and different lyrics to it? Um, can I play with it? I actually asked one of an old bandmate, "Hey, I want to utilize music for another like book project that I want to do, kind of release the tracks with stories." And they're like, "Yeah, I would rather you not." Um, and just part of me is like, "Do I have to care about what they think?" They don't own the copyright on the music, at least not individually. Just in the last hour, I've gotten 3 new CRC Voices emails, and it's all about human sexuality report. Hmm. Oh, I understand. Yeah, and I could see that, like, and there's certain artists that, well, and you always have to question the motivations, right? Why is he doing that? I mean, is he doing that because he's just wanting to be creativity? Is it trying to find a way to sell more? I mean, who knows? So last year, like in March, actually no, in April and May, when we were getting close to Synod 2022, it was nuts. Like the CRC Voices stuff was just like I joined actually I think around April, and it went nuts. You're just getting so many messages every day, and that's when I was still kind of participating in it. And so now I think I'm more annoyed that it's like they're still having the same debate. Like no new ideas are coming out. It's like this debate was had last year, a decision was made, and you're still trying to have the debate. It's like that's fine, but it's they're still trying to have the debate as if it will affect the decision again, and I don't think it will. And then, of course, there's a thousand messages of, "Oh, I'm just sad about this," and I don't have like that's just a personal thing. I don't have a lot of patience for that. And then part of it is that I don't really have a lot of like real relationships with a lot of these people. Um, I would say I've talked to Richard from this little corner a couple of times, talked to Paul a few times, but and I know I can mess with the settings there, but then I always get the FOMO. I fear that I might miss something. So that's kind of how I utilize it. Is I'll like glance over the different emails to see if there's anything I can pick out that's like, oh, that's interesting. It's rare that it ever happens, but maybe I'm a little bit have an addictive personality in that way. Hmm. See, like that, it's one of those where I feel like I'm intrigued by that. Like unpacking that lyric and experimenting with that. I'm that more I really appreciate when people musically play with their lyrics. And there's kind of a cohe or a consistency between lyrics and doing musically what you're saying in the lyrics. Um, one of the great musicians that I feel like does that regularly is like a Regina Spektor. Like she has that song Fidelity where the chorus is, and it breaks my heart, like she breaks up the word heart and kind of musically shows a breaking heart. I always think stuff like that is cool. So, with that said, I might be interested in hearing those lyrics with a different arrangement. And that's done in church music all the time, which was weird for me when I started going to studying music in Bible school was how many songs I knew, but those lyrics, other people knew those lyrics with different tunes. when I was a teacher, a music teacher, every Friday I would do a listening day with my students, and we would just listen to different songs and try to unpack some of those ideas of what does the music, what is the artist trying to say musically, like if it's a piece that doesn't have lyrics, but even if it has lyrics, is there agreement between the music and the lyrics? This is actually one of the problems I have with a lot of Christian music these days is there's not always a lot of consistency between what the lyrics are trying to say or the idea the lyrics are trying to convey and the musical progression. It's like a lot of Christian music has this very serious and somber and sentimental um musical accompaniment with lyrics that sometimes are joyful or a variety of different lyrics, and they're not always consistent. I wish I could set tile. um I have a small development company where I supervise like property renovations, and I know I would probably save more money or even make more money if I did any of this stuff myself. But I don't always have the time to sit down and learn some of these things. And I feel like for the amount of time it would take me to learn, time is money. I might as well just pay somebody else to do it. Oh, that actually reminds me. So part of what I've been doing in my community is really just trying to get people that I know or am interested in being friends with to come live near me. Part of it is just I don't want them to drive anywhere. But that was part of why I got my real estate license and even started my little development company. Um, but the whole idea of like embodied community, what so I heard somebody mention in a comment at some point that they just wanted to be able to walk to church. Well, my church is right around the corner from my house. So if anybody is ever considering relocating and interested in moving to the rougher side of Chicago, to kind of be part of a community where people live close to each other and share things and stuff like that, don't hesitate to hit me up. I can find you some housing. I can find you um, lots of stuff. Totally interested in that. That's interesting. How's my spirit? That might need to be unpacked a little bit more in that question. I am looking forward to the May event. Right now, my wife and I are just trying to figure out logistics. Um, Whether I just go by myself. I mean, I would like to be going to the event itself by myself. But my wife's sister lives down not far from there, so we're thinking about just going flying down as a whole family. I go to the event. Maybe my wife might tag along on a couple of things, but I plan to stay on the campground in the tents. Um, I actually met a couple of CRC guys at seminary last week that are interested in coming that live nearby there. Um, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I don't do camping a whole lot. So the whole idea, like staying in a tent, it's going to be something a little bit new for me. But we'll see how that goes. I'm curious as to how that works out in your family. Um, kind of coming from the same thing. It sounds like he's pretty steeped in his views, or like stubborn. I don't know if that's the right word, but not planning to move anytime soon. I live in a family where there's a lot of different perspectives on a lot of different things. Um, but we kind of just make it work because it's kind of our cultural background is that family is bigger than those things. So we disagree on things that are a little bit smaller. Um, I don't believe they're involved in estuary at all. So I met a guy named Aaron, who's a pastor. I forgot it's just outside of LA, but I forget exactly where he is. But he's like the only black guy in his church. But he grew up in Chicago, so we knew each other. He said he met Paul before, and so was interested in coming to the event. But I don't know that he's been involved in this little corner at all. I don't think he's come to estuary, but I think he's a bit familiar. Howdy, Kevin. Gavin, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Mo?
I'm doing better. I felt like crap for a whole week, so you don't truly appreciate feeling okay
I'm
until
doing
after
well.
you've
How are you?
felt like crap for a long time.
I had two streams going. I had to close the other tab, but that's good. You're feeling better.
Yeah. And I have like a really busy life, so it's one of those things where when I'm sick, especially for an extended period of time, so much falls through. So then catching up this week, like I was hoping to do a stream yesterday, but I had so many meetings that I had to get to. Um, I didn't get around to it.
Yeah, I had a meeting that started at the time this thing started, so I definitely couldn't hop in. I just increased your viewer count though. I just muted it and allowed it to sit over here. I saw people chatting. I'm guessing Chad is listening, but
Yeah, he said he's listening. He's tiling a shower.
yeah, I think Phlebas mentioned Richard having a struggle, and I was actually interested in Richard's struggle. I reached out to Richard, told him I'd be willing to talk about it, but that never it fell through the cracks. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, Richard. I mean, he's shared a bit on CRC Voices, and yeah, no, I mean he's a young guy, but he's got a great head on his shoulders,
yeah,
which is really cool. Like he's thinking about things that always surprise me for somebody his age.
it's interesting the topics that people focus on, like because I think he brought up a topic and nobody wanted to focus on it. So that's
Yeah,
always interesting to me about the things that people just ignore, right?
yeah, and it's interesting, but part of it is that to a certain degree, a lot of the active people on Voices don't necessarily he's an illustration of somebody that kind of is against what the narrative that they would like to push forward. I mean,
Yeah,
and to a certain degree, I am too. Like, there's people in my neighborhood that hate me simply because I'm an ethnic minority that grew up in the poor part of the city that's conservative.
and
Because
they hate you.
they hate that because I embody everything that's antithetical to what they want to believe. And many of them is because they grew up in like suburban white conservative and they hate that. And because they think all conservatives hate people of color. And so the fact that you have people of color who happen to be conservative, well, it's like garlic to a vampire.
Yeah,
And yeah,
the word hate strong, but yeah, like I would say at least a bias, like where we just tune out the things that don't agree with our view. Right?
Yeah.
That
Well, I mean, so some people so I have a guy that we are totally on opposite ideological sides of the spectrum, but we can have a beer together, we can hang out. His wife, well, like he'll show me we're having a drink, and then he'll show me a text from his wife that says, "Yeah, tell Mo he's a piece of shit." Like, Um, and it's a lot of it is that because my existence is antithetical to her ideology.
And when
Uh,
people say that, I guess the problem, like I laugh because it sounds like something that I've heard people say when they're trying to be funny, but then
mhm.
at the same time, it like, are they trying to be funny or is it actually like mean
Well, according to
spirited?
her husband, she's not trying to be funny. She really dislikes me
Golly,
strongly.
golly. And okay. Hmm.
So I mean, and yeah, it's one of those where like he would probably be in the same boat. But he and I had just have so much in common in terms of our, he was a music teacher, I was a music teacher. Um, he owns a couple buildings I've renovated, so we have so much to talk about that it's
Yeah.
like, um, yeah, let's just have a beer.
But it isn't like you can go hang out with people and then you can talk about the football game, but then something I've heard people say, no religion or politics, right?
Mm.
It's like so you
No, it is interesting though, like, but like the whole idea of the something in common. So I don't know if you're familiar with Daryl Davis.
Daryl Davis, yes, he would go meet with people in the KKK, and
Yeah,
he's
and he
got
tells
his
a story about the
large
first
black
time it
man.
happened is that he was playing at a bar and he
Okay.
got off the stage and this guy's like, "You're playing just like Jerry Lewis, Jerry Lee Lewis," and he's like, "Well, let me educate you on where Jerry Lee Lewis learned to play," and blah blah blah. And the guy was, he's like, "Yeah, I've never had a." He bought him a beer and he's like, "I've never bought a beer for a black guy before. I'm part of the
Yeah,
clan."
yeah,
He's like, "But I love the way you play piano."
yeah. That's
Uh,
like pacing and leading,
mm,
the ability to do persuasion.
yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes being able to play the piano really well helps.
Yeah. My 5-year-old daughter went to her first piano class yesterday.
Oh yeah, how'd you like it?
She liked it, so I guess I have to either fix the keyboard or get something. I think maybe the keyboard's out of batteries.
Oh, okay. Whatchamacallit, my daughter's been taking piano lessons for several years now, and she's at the age. Was about a year ago. She was at the age where she's like, I don't want to practice anymore. She used to like it, um, but then she got a new piano teacher. There was a young, good-looking Dominican guy, and all of a sudden, she enjoys her piano lessons again. And I'm like, oh no, she's at that age where that makes a difference.
Yeah, that reminds me. I think in Jacob's Discord server, there's talks about for example, incentivizing people doing the thing that you think that will be uh,
Yeah.
important in the future. But yeah, going to a class with some some attractive people can do that.
Well, to a certain degree, that's kind of how I got on the road to kind of pastoring in the way that I pastor.
Yeah.
So I met my wife. My wife is attractive, and she was working at an Anglican church. And so I would go with her to this Anglican church thinking, oh, look at this liturgy, this stuff that white people do. And was very like wrote it off. But going there for a few years because we dated and then got engaged and then got married, as I started reading, man, this whole liturgy thing is really kind of forming my way of thinking, forming my inner peace, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was like, I really like this. And now,
Yeah.
like, I pastor a church where we do Anglican style liturgy. And I'm very passionate about it.
Yeah.
But it
It's
just took a
a
pretty girl to get me into it.
it's a mind altering experience. That's what comes to mind. Like you can go do dance, but liturgy, it sounds like ritual. Sounds like
Yeah,
mind
yeah.
altering experience.
And I mean, yeah, and once you get onto the liturgy thing, it kind of opens your mind to start thinking about ritual.
Yeah.
And like I don't think I would have understood anything Peugeot is putting out if I hadn't gone through that process with liturgy first.
I don't
Because then,
understand what Peugeot puts out, to be
yeah.
honest.
Well, when he talks about the whole ritual, like he tells one story about like in Montreal, there was an old church that now gets rented out where people do like Harry Potter readings
Okay.
and they dress up and he's like, doesn't it all looks like liturgy? Like
Yeah.
it's this ritual that people have.
Yeah. There's a guy I worked with for a long time, and we were talking about flat earthers, and he recalled that like the founder of Flat Earth
Hmm.
Society or something like that was like asked the questions like, if we could prove that the Earth is not flat, it's like, would you just quit this? And he's like, no, I wouldn't,
Yeah.
because the actual relationships with the people was more important than, you know, whether or not there was flat Earth or not.
Look at this question from Chad, asking the hard questions. Would you say that you're racist or have racist tendencies? To a certain degree, it really depends on how you define that term. Like, do I every now and then judge people based on merely the color of their skin? I don't think I judge people ever really on the color of their skin. There are certain markers that like might give me an idea of their ethnic background, and then I probably make some judgments based on what I perceive to be their ethnic background.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would hold any of those judgments with any kind of absolution.
Yeah. So you can have a bias, and then you can try to be aware of your bias, and you can try to like remember that, you know, just because I had a bias doesn't mean that I should just give that bias power.
Exactly. Right? Because I mean, you definitely need those kinds of biases or judgments, right? To a certain degree,
I mean,
helpful.
I was almost drowned when I was 7 years old. Like a whole bunch of Native Americans in Socorro, New Mexico tried to drown me.
Yeah.
like that was a traumatic experience.
Yeah. And, you know, it's one of those, like, I grew up, you know, Chicago was very segregated. And then in the poor communities, kind of segregated by gang territory. So, like, I lived right on the border of the Latin Kings and the Gangster Disciples. Latin Kings were mostly Puerto Ricans. Gangster Disciples were mostly Black. So it's one of those where if I cross the street and I see somebody that's Black, I have to look for other markers that he might be a disciple. So I'll look for like the colors of the clothes. So it's not just that he's Black, but if he's Black, then I'm checking what direction is his hat turned.
Yeah.
You know, does he have a tattoo on one side of his body versus the other?
Well, I know there's like was it Crips and Bloods? There's like blue and red. And I would see people like flashing a blue, and then I would check. It's like, am I flashing a red? You know, it's like, I better be careful. Meanwhile,
but like, let's say he, you know, the Black guy came up to me, he has his hat to the left. I'm not going to just assume that he is, but I'm going to be cautious. Yeah. Okay. And then as he talks to me, you know, there's going to be other markers that, like, for example, I like to tell the story. I was selling a house not far from me, showing it to somebody, and I hear somebody cursing across the street. And that's common. I was kind of ignoring it, but it just kept going on. So I became curious, and I look, and it's this young Black kid that's cursing at me or in my direction. So then, you know, my inner self just starts to take over, and I start, okay, we got to scrap. And I start walking across the street. And I'm
that's
like,
your first instinct.
And he's like, yeah, you white mother, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, are you cursing at me because you think I'm white? And he's like, yeah, blah, 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 you know, profanities. And I was like, I'm Puerto Rican, man. And he goes, my bad. And he just walked away.
It's so ridiculous.
It is ridiculous, but like, what if I had never asked the question?
Yeah, it's still ridiculous that he'd be cursing at a white person too. Like,
yeah. I mean, it all, but it's one of those where, like, he was being racist. But you know, I think what you need to do is you need to be constantly making judgments and constantly refining those judgments, right? Because it's like, so if I meet another Puerto Rican person, right, I can't assume that they speak Spanish because a lot of Puerto Ricans don't speak Spanish. I'm not fluent in Spanish. I don't speak it very well. There are certain Puerto Rican dishes that not all Puerto Ricans like, even though they're Puerto Rican dishes, right? And so it's just like or like salsa music. It's common in Puerto Rico, or to dance salsa music, but not all Puerto Ricans can dance salsa music. Not all Puerto Ricans like to listen to it either. So it's just like, there's these generalities. It helps, like, Pageau talks a lot about norms and exceptions. Like, you have to acknowledge that there are a large amount of exceptions to a lot of different things.
There's also, I think we are programmed, like, we can be programmed by our experiences in our environment with like real people, but then we can also be programmed by the stories that we encounter, like in the media. Like, that's a big one. Like, all of a sudden you can get an impression about reality that's skewed. Like
Mhm. Well, I mean, and it's interesting because sometimes that's reality about yourself. This is a big thing that happened in the '90s with rap music. I'm on a different podcast. It's supposed to be airing, I think, in a couple months. We're recording a bunch of episodes called Four Colored Commentary, because it's me and three black guys talking about a lot about comics and hip hop and other topics. But one of the things we talk about is in the '90s, you know, rap music and hip hop music went mainstream, but there was only one real or two real styles that went mainstream. Because in the '80s, you had a really diversity within hip hop music. You had gangster rap, party rap, you had conscious rap, you had all these things, and they were kind of equally popular. Once it went mainstream, what went mainstream was mostly dance and gangster rap.
I remember second grade, crisscross.
Yeah. That would have been more dance music, dance. But then what happens is that now kid and urban community sees this representation of the urban community that's super popular, and I start to think, oh, that's talking about me, and that's how we are. And I start even forming my identity or the way I think of myself according to this, which isn't necessarily real.
Right.
Or it's certainly not the only aspect of it. It's not the dominant thing.
This is the sorcery. Like it's so powerful that our whole worldview and our biases and what we're blind to is shaped by like the Hollywood, the place of magic,
Yeah, and so and then you get older, and sometimes you don't question that. One of the biggest songs growing up, and everybody knows this song, Sir Mix-a-Lot, "Baby Got Back," right?
Yeah.
That song came out when I was fairly young, and it was so popular, it was just in my head all the time. And then it's no wonder that there were certain immutable characteristics I started looking for when I started entering the dating scene. And it was one of those things. And then not only did I look for that, but I knew that I was looking for that.
Yeah.
And I was okay with that being one of the primary things that I was looking for.
I remember like wearing Jordache shoes from Walmart, and then going into like third grade and having people picking on me because I had like fake Jordans. Yeah. It's like, it's just so silly. But then I would feel bad, and then my aunt would want to allow me to go get some better shoes that I wouldn't get picked on. It's like that's really strange that that whole sequence of events happens in the culture. It's eye-opening to what humans really are.
Well, and then what happens is then people will start saying, well, that's what the culture is all about. And it's like, well, this is Latino culture, or this is Black culture. And it's like, that's maybe cultural for some Latinos, some Blacks, some whites, but it gets a lot more complicated than that.
Yeah, there's a diversity of culture.
Yeah. And I feel like people take that for granted really quickly. That diversity, even within cultures. Because like Latino culture, well, that includes Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and Guatemalans and Hondurans and all, and then there's Puerto Rican culture. Well, that includes all these different parts of Puerto Rico, and then Puerto Ricans in the mainland.
Yeah, this makes me concerned about ideas like democracy, because it would be interesting to track like how many humans have these kind of oversimplistic biases that are in their operating system, and then how many of those are voting, what percentage are going out and voting. And
not only that, I looked on one of my Facebook memories, and I was like, I don't know that we should be encouraging everybody to go out and vote, right? Because you're getting a lot of ignorant people to support things that they don't even know what they're supporting. The goal would be to have an educated electorate.
But and then the question is, how do you do that education? Because nobody seems to be doing it. Like point out someone that's doing it properly, and then I'll promise you that I can point out ways they could be doing it better, right?
Yeah, and I always tell people there's a difference between allowing people to vote, like they have the right to vote, and encouraging people to vote. I wouldn't take the right to vote away, but there's certain people I'm not going to go out of my way to encourage them to vote.
My buddy works at NASA from Macedonia. Um, he posed the thought experiment that you could only vote if you paid taxes, and right. So if you are, for example, receiving tax dollars, you wouldn't be able to vote, right?
Okay.
So, things like that. But yeah, there's different ways to try and change it, but then there's not even a system by which we can change things easily, like an
Yes.
experiment with different ways of doing things.
And there's pros and cons with that, right? Because if
Yeah,
it is
always.
easy to change, well, then people start changing things willy nilly, and very few people will admit that they were wrong.
The thing is if you facilitate experiments, there's going to be different outcomes in the experiments, and like I'm reminded of like all the wrong ways to build a light bulb are helpful. Like to say it's wrong, it's you can say it's wrong, but you can also say, well, that was helpful.
Yeah, because you learn, okay, at least I know not to do it that way again.
Yeah.
And how unhelpful is it, right? Is it dangerously unhelpful, or is it just annoying? Could I die if I do it this way? Because then I really want to tell everybody and make that known so that they don't have to try this again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is I think I talked to C.W. Weeks recently, and his sentiment was that I sound like a Southerner who, because I expressed like I don't like federalism, I don't like the Constitution, and so I just come off as someone who was like from the South, who saw the merits in a confederacy, for example, things like that. But there's actually good ideas that we scrapped, that dictators scrapped, and built up large federal governments that change increasingly slowly. As they get larger, they change increasingly slowly. It's connected to physics and mass and inertia. There's these patterns like that.
Now I wonder, CW said you sound like somebody from the South, which you are from the South. Right. Are there any things that like you would talk to somebody like CW and be like, yeah, you're definitely from the North? Or you sound like somebody from like a Yank.
I mean, I might have, let's see. There's accents and dialect, right? But I guess the real question is like, are there ideas like from a different culture? Yeah, I don't know. Like, if I do remember going to, I think I mentioned it to you. I remember going to like New York and at a young age and just going around saying hello, good morning. People thought I was crazy, right? So
yeah. Well, it's funny because in Chicago, thanks, Phoebus. But in Chicago, you have in the South Side, you have a huge area that's dominantly African American, and on the West Side, you have some big neighborhoods that are dominantly African American. But culturally, they're fairly different.
Yeah.
Like I always say, you go on the South Side, you end up talking to the wrong person. You say good morning. They'll be like, good morning. Give me all your money. On the West Side, you end up saying good morning to the wrong person. You say good morning. They'll be like, F you. Give me all your money. But there's still almost element on the South Side, even among like the rougher element, that is still polite.
Yeah. So it's
good morning. How are you? I used to walk on the South Side when I taught there, and it used to freak me out how polite some of the people were. Because on the West Side, you don't get that same kind of politeness.
Yeah, I think I'd asked the question at one point. It's like, what are the rules? And I'd mentioned, the things I don't like. One of them is stereotyping. And so, I could talk about my experience that I had in New York City. And then it's like, well, then do I, at that point, am I just going to stereotype? Right. And so similar with what you're talking about, some experiences you've had. But honestly, it's like if you went into those communities, there's a distribution. There's a percentage of people who behave a certain way, right? It's there's no monoculture in there. Exactly. It's not like everyone there is going to pull out a gun, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and what's funny is that most people won't, right?
Most people
won't. The dominant culture is that there's definitely a lot more people that aren't going to pull a gun on you than are.
Right.
And so the culture kind of gets known by these extreme exceptions.
Right. And that's where you could have music and I don't even like to call it news, but it's like the information about the strange event, that you may or may not want to know about.
Yeah.
It's like, can all of a sudden bias your whole perspective and create the prejudice.
Yeah, and it really, to me, it really kind of gets into this question of, well, how do you learn? Like, uh, a lot of people used to say, the readers that love, oh, books, you can explore the world through books and blah blah. And there's a certain amount of truth in that, but it's like if you want to learn about a people group, there's a lot that you're not going to get from a book, because a book is going to deal mainly with a lot of the generalities and might point out some of the exceptions here, but feel like how that plays out, you kind of have to go and learn it a bit. You have to dive in. You can't just do that in academic study.
Yeah, it seems also like there's some areas of knowledge and like behavior or work where uh, you basically are encouraged to have a prejudice, right? Like you're going off a certain demographic or a market or whatever, and then it becomes easy for people to say, "Oh, you are prejudiced." And it's like, well, we are using a kind of um, stereotyping in order to
Well, I
accomplish our
mean,
goal.
that's a survival mechanism. That's a requirement. Like you have to categorize things to like exist in the world, and categorizing people as part of that. It's just how much do you absolutize your categories?
Yeah.
I like this question. Gavin couldn't wait to talk about guns, huh?
Well, yeah, Fleba's joined a just chatting string with me once. And
Oh yeah. I'm curious, as a Southerner, are you a stereotypical Southerner in terms of guns?
well, I don't have like an assault rifle.
Oh, okay. No assault
Uh,
rifle.
I've got like one 9mm 12 gauge shotgun, 22, and I just bought two Red Riders to
Oh yeah.
do target practice. Try to encourage gun safety with these.
Okay.
Um,
I
these
have never
guns.
fired a gun. I mean, I've done like
So did you understand what I just said, or was it
I
like
do a bit.
okay?
My brother's a military guy. Was a cop for a little while too. He's a big gun advocate. Um, and then my ex brother-in-law similar. So I run in circles where a lot of people are really into guns. I've never been into guns. I mean, as a kid, toys, but I've never really had a strong desire to own one.
Right,
I've never been against it either. It's
right.
just more that it's kind of like alcohol for me. I grew up, I never really, like in my 20s, I hardly ever drank. But it was mainly because I didn't like the flavor of alcohol. It wasn't because of any kind of principle that I had in regards to it. And that's kind of how it is with guns. Um, right now, the only reason I won't go shoot a gun is because I'm afraid I'll look stupid.
Yeah, that I can tell you one mistake. I saw someone had like a 45 and they were holding it right next to their face and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
shot and it came up and it popped them in between the eyes and they started bleeding.
Yeah, I'm
It's
afraid
like
of like the recoil. I'm not going to be able to anticipate it properly, and it's going to make me look really stupid. And somebody's going to get it on camera, and
you could always work your way up. You can start with the paintball for
paintball.
Jesus.
I
And
have fired a paintball gun before, and
yeah,
I only went paintballing once, and I sucked so bad at it that I hadn't never had the desire to go again.
yeah. I played a little bit of paintball. It's
Yeah, I'm just like, I'm a very much, I grew up and I dominated a lot. I'm a quick learner, so I dominated a lot in academics. I was obviously one of the top guys in my class. In sports, I could always compete and do fairly well. So if there's something where I like suck at it, like right away, like really bad, it's like it's hard for me to push myself to want to even get better at it, because
mm,
there's the whole ego. I'm used to just people praising me. Oh wow, you learned that so fast, and
yeah. Hmm. Yeah, I guess my nature is a little different. I think I don't like other people being better than me, and so then like I work really hard.
yeah,
If especially if there's like a group of people trying to do the thing,
yeah.
I feel terrible if I can't like do it as well.
Yeah. So then that's the thing. So I'm similar in that regard, but it's one of those things where, there's so many different things that you can do. Well, I'm just going to stick to these things that I know I can compete. in. Um,
Yeah.
but if it's one of those where I feel like there's no way I'm ever going to compete, or I at least don't have the time in my life to put in what it takes to be able to compete, I'm like, forget it. I don't even want to try it.
Yeah. I get bored, and so I go try to do something new. Like,
Yeah,
that's usually how it works. Like,
getting me to do something new is really difficult.
yeah,
Like my wife is really like, let's go try this. And I'm like, "Oh." I always tell her to like nag me about it, and because I almost always enjoy doing something new,
yeah.
but it's like inertia getting me to go and do it.
Well, it's hard to get me to do things that I've done many times. So my wife's like, "Come on, let's go exercise." And it's like at that point, I just have to submit and then say, "Okay, we'll do it." And then I do it and feel good, but I did not want to go
Yeah.
do it. Right.
How Trudeau was Phlebas
uh,
on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being Trudeau, 1 being Trump.
he wasn't revealing his. I feel like he was trying to keep a fog about himself, which is kind of smart, right?
Okay.
So, um, but yeah, I don't. Yeah,
Yeah, I feel like when I was meeting Canadians in uh, at seminary last week, I was probably doing a little bit of a similar thing, trying to feel them out. Okay,
yeah.
how Trudeau are you? Um,
No, and then the Trump thing. I actually like. I was hoping that it would take a liar to sneak in to position of power in order to do good, but it didn't work out the way I hoped. So, but I mean, he did. It's not like he was all bad, but like I wanted to see him, for example, do a debate like on Joe Rogan with
oh,
other
okay, yeah,
candidates, and I wanted him to stop going to these events with all the mainstream media. I wanted him to really change that up,
hmm
like to really impact the sorcery that's happening in politics, but he didn't do it.
yeah. Well, I mean, the impression the impression that I get from Trump, and one of the things I always try to insist is that I don't really know a whole lot about Trump. Like, I feel like right now it's really cool to say, well, Trump is like this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm still getting to know my wife, and I spend more time with her than anybody else in the whole world.
Yeah,
So what I can say about Trump, my knowledge base is going to be very low. But I feel like he's somebody that doesn't like to be predicted, doesn't like to be controlled, and kind of has enough money and power to avoid that in a lot of areas. And so there were a lot of people that had this expectation or desires for him. And it's like, no, he's going to do what he wants to do. But like trying to figure out what he wants to do, I feel like people try to answer that question too easily. Like, oh, Trump wants
yeah,
this. And I'm like, does he? Maybe.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, I guess the question, one thing to look at is what did he say he was going to do to his base, and then
mhm,
what did he actually do compared to what he said he was going to do?
mhm.
And that's an interesting take whenever you look at presidents for in general.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah, but that's one of those things where then you got to compare that to what every other president has said to their base and what they've
oh, yeah.
actually done, right? And
Well, there's
then
a
what is
lot
the
of liars.
potential
There's a
being
lot of
able to do
liars.
any of those things?
Yeah, it'd be nice, for example, it's like if you could put on the hat and you could say, all right, I'm going to tell the truth. This is what I'm going to do. But when I take off this hat and go out and get in front of the camera, I'm going to say the things I need to say so that I can do the things that I did when I was wearing the hat, right?
Hmm.
Something
Yeah,
like that. Uh,
yeah, but it's one of those things I like because how I see it is that when you get up to that higher level, there are so many factors involved in it, and there's so many promises, right? And in order to get one of these promises accomplished, you may have to sacrifice the others. Um, and so I always just try to reserve my judgment a bit, saying, "Yeah, I suspect this, but I don't really know."
yeah.
I like,
You can also have people who overcommit, right? And they either do it intentionally, lying, saying they will do the thing they really can't do if you just
yeah,
knew the law, for example, and knew what
which seems like
as
most politicians, right? I mean,
right,
because
right,
those are typically the guys that get elected, right? Are the ones that
right.
overpromise.
Which is why our democracy sucks. So
Now, why would you? So, I think there's a lot of people that would agree. Yeah, our democracy sucks right now. What are what do you think contributes to that? Or do you
Oh,
think it ever didn't suck?
well, I mean, the idea of a confederacy was interesting. That the whole kind of had to have this large amount of agreement in order for the whole to change. And there's cost to that. It's not all
Yeah.
good. For example, if someone wants to come in and kill you, it might be hard to organize the whole to come to an agreement, right? Because
Yeah.
everybody's got different interests. I think times are different now with information technology, right? If someone came in and started attacking us now, we actually could be aware of that and communicate it. But back then, it would have been hard. So that's one thing. Just the whole foundation is we need a new foundation than what we have. And then it's not just the foundation at that level. It's I ran experiments trying to test the election system itself. Like I would go in and write in my name, and then I even took a picture and recorded it, which is illegal. And then I went and looked years later at the records, and I noticed, hey, I can't find my name. And then I contacted them. I said, hey, it appears like some of your records are missing. And they're like, yeah, you're right. We're going to fix that. And then I looked later, and it still didn't get fixed. Right. So even the system itself on how we allow for the elections to be counted is wrong. So fundamental, but then so many layers, like the difficulty and even getting on the ballot and ballot access.
Yeah.
So it's all kind of problems that are layered on top of each other. Like one facilitates the corruption at the next level, and it stacks. There's a lot of corruption at every level.
Yeah.
Like there's just some things that, like, in order for things to change, is like there's so much you have to do that by the time I think you come out of it, you are a corrupt person. It selects for corruption. It actually does not select for righteousness.
Yeah. And Transfigured Sam, I remember hearing him talk that one of the main goals of any entity, whether that be an individual person or anything, actually, I think he said it applies to all matter, but is to continue existing. So if you're in government, like you're a senator, one of your main purposes, maybe subconsciously, is to stay a senator. Once you have power, your goal is to remain in power. And so now you're at the top, and you're fudging a system, or you're playing the rules, or sometimes even changing the rules to maintain where you are.
And that's actually like a corruption, right? So like the proper way of being, like according to Jesus, for example, might be that you would be willing to sacrifice yourself, right? So for example, if you end up in a position of power, ideally you'd be looking for the ones who would do better than you, and you would sacrifice your power and try to raise up the one that's better. Like that would be righteous, as opposed to the way things are now. But yeah, there's this huge temptation.
Like that's the right way, but it's also to a certain degree contrary to our depraved human nature.
I mean, I agree.
Which is why Jesus is such a radical figure, because it says your natural way of being, what you're naturally inclined to do. No, you have to think of something bigger and higher.
But couldn't we actually try to select for people who understand this pattern of trying to seek out those who should be put into more power than yourself, that you actually serve the ones who are most righteous and seeking out the ones who are most righteous?
I think we ought to try.
Yeah. Not easy either, but
yeah, exactly. So I would say yes. But again, the
thing is, like, am I going to go sell the house and the property and go take that money and give it to the bigger thing?
Well, the other people? Part is how quickly you're able to figure that out. Like, for example, right, helping poor people, right? It's a big thing. Oh, I'm going to raise money to help the poor people. But then you end up still, pocketing, because you have to pocket a certain amount because you have to feed your family and whatnot. But then you start, my needs have grown. And pretty soon you're raising all this money for the poor people and pocketing most of it for yourself. And so figuring out when that trend starts to kick in, like, when am I taking,
There's even the system itself, like, will prevent you from operating in such a way where you could say, I don't want to use money within the organization, because then they have this thing called unearned benefits, right? It's like, they essentially are, the system is it's selecting for a way of being that is not righteous. That's
Mhm.
it. It's difficult. It's a difficult situation we find ourselves in.
Yeah, I agree. And then it's also like the bigness of the like the amount of people that are included in that system, right? As you get bigger, it becomes harder to it becomes slower, becomes harder to see, the level of
Yeah,
focus.
that's
Um,
where you need information technology,
mhm,
right? With information technology, you can accomplish goals that you can't accomplish without the information
mhm.
technology, right? So,
Yeah, and I'm interested to hearing like more because obviously it seems like you have quite a bit of experience with this. Like, can you give some examples of how that would work itself out?
um,
Like how information technology can improve these kind of
yeah,
systems?
the problem is there's hundreds, but in thousands.
Yeah, well, and this is the problem with some of the problem with the rise of the information world, right? There's so much information. How
Right.
do you pick where to start?
So, I mean, yeah, it's just, what is your goal, right? And I listened to Pastor Paul's last sermon, and he talked about how we don't even remember things, and it's like, well, pen and paper that helps us remember. That's information technology, right? So
Mhm,
I could have notes, and I could be tracking what you're saying and the points. Like I could try to bring that conversation back to Richard, right?
mhm,
And why did we ignore Richard and go off in this other direction? So but the last one, I like the Ryan Lewis has this dash little dash corner.com. It allows for you to search through the things that have been said. Um, and then Adam, I think you know Adam,
yeah,
he pointed me at a technology called Tube Archivist, and it's open source, and it allows you to do the same thing. And so if you take that and you put it in a classroom, all of a sudden I don't have to take notes. My notes don't need to be as good. I can actually type in the right keywords that allows me to pop into the recording in order to filter out the noise and raise up the signal.
mm,
And so you can do that in a classroom, and you can do that, which is what Ryan Lewis actually has as a kind of, I would call this maybe like this little corner is it's a classroom around the topic of theocracy or something like that. But
okay,
you could use that in, in any classroom or any school, and you could also use it in your city council, right?
yeah,
Um, and so, for example, if um, I could install the technology, which then allows for uh, people who want to participate and help with government and be of service to be able to identify the signals that are relevant to them and their goals, and be able to contribute signals which are valuable because they have developed a valuable skill set and can contribute in certain ways. And like that information technology will exist. Like I'm confident that it will exist. So,
yeah,
and the implications, that's the real question. What's the implications of being able to do stuff like this? And that's just an example. And
yeah.
there's thousands of examples where information technology has not been integrated uh, in such a way to improve our ability to produce good fruit.
Mm,
My favorite president, and I don't know a lot of them, but the one that stands out is with Teddy Roosevelt, because I think he was like the director for the police, but he was, what I read, he kind of received credit for the idea of bringing the telephone system, integrating it into, into the law enforcement, right?
mm.
And if you can just imagine what a brilliant idea that is, like integrating the information technology so that you can get the feedback you need to be responsive, right?
That wasn't that something that J. Edgar Hoover did with like the fingerprint
I'm not
system?
sure. I'm not sure.
Um,
I know that Hoover was into like FBI and
yeah,
intelligence in
because
general.
finally, a lot of criminals at the time it seemed would just cross state lines, and then it's like, well, we can't cross those state lines, and so then Hoover started this federal police that could track criminals across state lines.
Yeah, and my issue is like the government agencies who like to do that thing where they persist, which a solution is something like sunset clauses. Elon
Mhm.
Musk. I first heard about that when Elon Musk mentioned it, but it seems like they're focused on a certain goal, like identifying the bad guys. And it's like it would be nice if they were also interested in identifying good, righteous people and lifting them up, right?
Mhm.
So it's not just harm prevention, but it's also productivity, producing good fruit.
Yeah, yeah.
I
No,
don't see
that's
them doing
interesting.
that.
That is interesting to think about because I feel like it's kind of like how people prioritize things. It's like, well, it's more important right now to find the bad guy, and then it's like, maybe that's true, but then they forget about looking for the good guy at all. It's like, and so it becomes one or the other instead of, well, can we find room for both?
If they looked for the good guy, they would find the person and the people that would replace them. That's
Hmm.
the thing, is that self-sacrificing
Yeah,
thing.
that's
Right.
also true, right?
Right. They have no incentive to go out looking for righteous people, because it turns out that humans who want power tend to be attracted to the places where there is power, and that nature uh, is incompatible. There's a conflict of interest with some other goal, like finding the right people and putting them into positions of power.
Hmm.
It's just not compatible.
Well, and obviously, everything I talk about has to go back a bit to Harry Potter.
Okay.
The Dumbledore maybe that would make for the best leaders are those that don't want it, because those that do want it, once they get that power, they want to hold on to that power, right?
Well,
And
you could be someone who wants to do just a very short stint into a position such that you can help
mhm,
point out those who are greater, and then even like develop the system by which those who are greater
mhm.
can be pointed at, right?
Yeah, because I think of like in my current denomination within the Christian Reformed Church, it seems like those that are interested in having power or making decisions are all in Grand Rapids, and that's what they're going for. And there's a lot of other like pastors that probably don't agree with them ideology, but their goal isn't to go to Grand Rapids. Their goal is to minister in this context. And so then you have this distribution where it's like all the power players are over here, but all the people who might be better equipped to make that more diverse aren't interested in that. And now you have this big disconnect between the leaders of the denomination and the rest of the denomination.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it helps. Like there's a narrative that gets spread that you should not, if you're the person who says, hey, I think I would be a better leader than these other people, um, that you automatically get disqualified, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
perspective that I would question that as like a psyop, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you have two, uh, yeah, if you have two armies that are battling each other, and if one army can do a psyop to convince the best generals from trying to be of the most service possible, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant move by the enemy,
Yeah.
and that's my concern, is that we have somehow told the stories and tricked people who would be most competent. We tricked them into believing something that prevents them from being as competent as they could be.
Yeah. But I mean, because one of the tricky parts is that there's two skill sets there, right? There's the being competent and convincing others that you're competent. And so you have some people who their gifting is convincing other people that they're competent and not actually being competent at all. So let's say I'm
That's
very
a deceptive move.
what's that?
That's a deceptive move.
Well, yeah, I mean that's like our election system right now. It's our election system. It opts
It,
for people
it's
who are
also
good
the
at getting
church.
elected,
It's also
not
the
necessarily,
church, and
and
I
even
mean,
in church, right?
and
Um,
the companies. I mean, it's every organization pretty
yeah,
much. Yeah.
because that's a different skill set. Selling yourself and is a skill set that needs to be developed, and there's some people that are very gifted in that way.
And it includes manipulation and deception. That's
Hmm.
the people who use manipulation and deception have a leg up on the people who do not use it. I referenced the cartoon Grimgriz highlighted from Scott Adams, where it's Dogbert. Dogbert,
Oh yeah,
he's just got 10 million new subscribers, and Dilbert's behind him. Uh, and, and the Dogbert's like, how's that truth and honesty doing for
yeah,
you? So yeah, I don't like the idea that you would have to do the deception and the lying in order to be of service as most as possible. I don't like that
yeah.
idea.
Now, however, I would say that there is a difference, maybe even small difference, between manipulation and deception. Like deception is kind of making you think something that's not true, right? It's it's spinning things in a way that's not truthful. Manipulation can be highlighting the things that are important.
Right. And then, but so Jordan Peterson says, at least don't lie. And it
Yeah.
occurred to me recently that if I present to you my take on the situation and you know that I have a delusion and I'm wrong and you don't correct me, then you have participated in the delusion, in the deception, right? You could have corrected my deception, but did not, because you're going by a rule that says at least don't lie. And you've then said, okay, I'm fine. I didn't lie.
Although it
Even
depends on
though,
your level of analysis, right? Because certain deceptions require a process, and it depends on how long that process is. So I might have to ignore certain aspects of that deception to lead you to something that will undo that deception, if that makes sense.
you're talking about persuasion,
Yeah.
like
Because,
that
I
pace and
mean,
lead thing we talked
because what
about.
would be the difference between persuasion and, let's say, manipulation? Is persuasion a form of manipulation?
Yeah. Yeah. That,
Because, like, if, let's say somebody's terrified of snakes, right? And I'm like, we need to get through this room because this house is on fire, but there's a snake in a cage over here. That
yeah.
snake isn't going to be able to access you at all. But if I mention that snake, you're going to be so terrified that you're going to stay in that burning house.
Yeah.
I'm going to try not only not to mention the snake, but get you through to avoid looking at the snake as well. Because there's a certain aspect of your fear that's irrational that might lead you to death. Now, this person, Familia Bazzani, I don't know how to pronounce that properly, says it's purely horizontal and no God or sovereignty. I don't know that I would agree with this statement. I don't think it's purely horizontal. I would say maybe it's mostly horizontal, mainly because I would acknowledge the sovereignty of God in it, but I would also acknowledge my inability to comprehend how that sovereignty like plays itself out. I do my best and trust that God is sovereign over that and will allow it to go forward.
What is, I didn't get Bazzani's point there.
So I think he's saying in terms of like trying to manipulate people or get people to see something to a certain degree, you're taking on the role of God. Because God is, if you trust in God, then if you're being truthful, you can trust that God will use that.
And
And
I do think I misspoke when I like talk bad about manipulation, because I mean everything I do is a manipulation. I get that. I think the part I like, the part I know I don't like is the deception which serves me at the expense of you, right?
Mhm.
That's the thing I know I don't like. And then it gets questionable at that point, because it's like people can then deceive. Yeah, I don't like the other being sacrificed with a deception for your
Mhm.
own benefit. I really don't like that, and it
Although
happens a
I
lot.
would say it does get tricky because there are so, like, for example, in 2016, Trump got elected. Whether you like it or not, it happened. There were several. I walked into a teacher's lounge. Actually, no, I didn't walk. There's a different story. A buddy of mine that I worked with, he walked into the teacher's lounge. We both went to the same school, and there was this white girl crying. And my buddy is another Latino guy, I believe Costa Rican. So he walks into the teacher's lounge. This white girl's crying, and he's like, "What? What are you crying about?" She's like, "Well, I just feel so sorry for you because of this election." She didn't know that this guy actually had voted for Trump, but she's crying on his behalf, but it really has no idea what his interests or goals are. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really common. It's this idea: I'm sacrificing for you. Stop sacrificing for me. Like, because you don't know enough about what my goals are and what's good for me in order to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, and I'm not actually. Let's see. Yeah, it would be, in order to do it properly, you would need people to be able to say what they want, like, and say, I need help and this is what I
Mhm.
want, and then you would then try to be of service to them and what they want after having understood what they want, right?
Yeah,
Instead of assuming that they
because it does
want
require
those
like
things.
a relationship to like get to know what that person wants and needs, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, a relationship. There's you can use information technology that kind of makes that line fuzzy, but yeah.
Yeah, I like what Felipe said here. What leadership is called to sacrifice for others and for sacrifice others, which makes me think of like in a military example, right? A military general has to send his troops out, knowing that some, maybe sometimes even many, will die. For I mean, I think of example the storming the beaches of Normandy, right? A lot of people had to die, and somebody had to make that decision, knowing that a lot of people were going to have to die. So, to a certain degree, that leader sacrificed a bunch of people.
I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to just assume that it's right that a leader has to sacrifice others. Right? Maybe it's the way things have been, and it can work, but that doesn't mean that it's the only way, and that maybe there's not a way that's better that does not include sacrificing others. So,
you sound like Aberforth.
I don't know who that is.
That's Dumbledore's brother.
Okay.
Have you read the Harry Potter books at all?
I have. It's been a long time. I need to revisit them. Yeah.
So, because Dumbledore's brother is critical of Dumbledore because what he says is he keeps sacrificing these other people. Like all these people keep suffering and dying because of his plan or whatever. And I think there is a tension there. I mean, it gets tricky. Chad has a question for you.
Yeah, I got it right here, Chad. I haven't looked at it. I've had it for a couple of days. I haven't looked at it yet. So I will get to it. And I thank you for sending the letter.
It's tricky trying to keep up with these comments.
Yeah, I have a hard time looking at the comments and listening.
Yeah.
And paying attention. I do get red notifications over here at work if there's a fire. So
that's good.
I'm a firefighter in the virtual realm. Virtual firefighter.
Virtual firefighter. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever? What's your like? When I was in like junior high, this would have been like the mid '90s. You know, that movie Hackers came out, and everybody was coming up with their own like online alias, right? You know, Acid Burn, Zero Cool.
Okay.
Do you got any of those that you use as a online firefighter?
No. Well, no. I'm at work. They pay me to try to prevent the fires and respond as quickly as possible. The company does.
Okay.
But yeah, when I was my avatars, I think at one point I called myself Hi Jesus because I would get high and then talk to Jesus. And then another one was a Doggy Mo, which is backwards is called Oh My God.
Oh, okay.
But yeah. But no, I'd stick with my name now. I've made enough mistakes where I can avoid a bunch that I've already made. So that's the way I do open source. I did not want to contribute to like open source projects when I first started because I knew I had a lot to learn. But now I have the confidence to be aware of the kinds of mistakes that can be made, and I can contribute to open source with confidence. So, and even with my name, right, and not be embarrassed about the things I do and say.
You're ready to be seen by the world, to present yourself, stand up straight.
Yeah, something like that.
Isn't that one of Peterson's rules?
Stand up straight with your shoulders back. And it connects it to being a lobster so that you have the right serotonin levels.
Mm-hmm. And go by your real name.
Go by your real name. Yep. What is the real name?
Yeah, wow. That's man. Now we're getting real deep. Like, my name on my birth certificate is Moises. How many people call me Moises in my life? Very few.
Yeah.
And so I mean, people call me Moses, Mo, other things. Some friendly, some not.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad wanted to name me Tarzan, and my mom wasn't having it. So
No, man, that would have been so awesome.
he wanted to call me Zan. So
Zan.
yeah,
My parents actually, they didn't have a boy name picked for me. They only
yeah,
had a girl name when I was born. And then I was born. Obviously, I wasn't a girl. So then they're like, "Oh, well," they hadn't been Christians very long. So like, well, Moses is a good name. And the
yeah,
doctor said, "Why don't you make it Spanish?" And that's
cool.
from Moisés. It was very last spur of the moment.
I tried to mess with the lady who wrote down the name for my son, my firstborn. I was like, "Yeah, we're thinking about Pancake Palmer," and
Pancake.
she didn't. There was no response. But
So all my kids have a pattern to their names. An O sound, like my son's named after me, so Mo, and their middle name starts with L, E-L. So like
okay,
my son is Moises Eliezer.
okay,
And we do it something that could be pronounced both in English and in Spanish. And so we're like, well, what if we have another kid? We need another O name. And we have Glow, Mo, and Joe. And so what are some other names that could be pronounced in Spanish? So we've been joking that if we had another boy, we would name it Donaldo El Trump, like
okay.
Spanishized Donald Trump. We probably would never do that. Uh, but just knowing how much of my family would go nuts if we did something like that. Some would go nuts in a happy way, and some would go nuts in like the way they would be so angry with us. But my kids have gotten the biggest kick out of it. If they had a little brother named Donaldo El Trump, and then it makes me wonder if anybody's done that yet.
Yeah, may have. May have. There's a I guess like you're saying, there's a story that if you have a certain culture and skin color, you can't like this political person, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I imagine there's quite a few Hispanic people who like President Donald Trump.
Oh yeah, I mean,
So,
it's become pretty popular. They actually during just before the 2020 election, there was a group of Cubans. I think they're mostly Cubans. There might have been some Puerto Ricans in there. That came out with a salsa song called "Voy a votar a Donald Trump." We will be voting, but they wrote a whole song about voting for Donald Trump.
okay,
There's a music video on YouTube. You could search this "Votar Donald Trump" or just Donald Trump salsa, and
okay.
it's a funny video in my opinion. Um, but yeah, the not only that there's some that voted that way, but we're so happy about voting that way they had to write a song and make a music video and professionally record it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been happy voting. And
I've
I have
actually
like,
only voted a few times in my life.
yeah,
Yeah, voting's inconvenient, and living in Chicago, Illinois, it's hard to be motivated to vote.
yeah.
Um,
I remember I went to like one representative and I'm like, "Can I record this meeting?" And he's like, "No." It's like, and my spirits were busted because in my mind I'm like, "This is the beginning, right?" Or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
I can imagine paths. I can make up stories, and he's just like, "No, you can't record this."
yeah,
I was like, let's ignore the fact that a good like a good person will stand up straight with their shoulders back and try to record this thing. But I guess he was tired. I'll give him. I'll
yeah.
give him one.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand those that do that, but it's like I'm the type of person that no, I need to put myself out there for better, for worse. I got to put myself out there and see what people do with it. And people don't always like it, um, but
Yeah.
then they can stay away from me.
Yeah, ideally, like that's the reason I like the Confederacy idea. Is like people should be able to disagree with each other and live peacefully, right?
Hmm.
Like that's where we should be, but it's not where we're at.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think in this little corner, I'm in good company as one that's been basically kicked out or asked to leave multiple churches. And it's it sucks in the moment, but to certain like there was one church that I was part of with my wife. that basically recommended that we leave and start another church. He's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I want to move in a way that theologically I don't think you're going to disagree with, or I think that you are going to disagree with. So you probably just want to go. And I respected it. Like, I was like, oh, at least he's honest with me, and he's right. I wouldn't agree with that, and wanting to send me with his blessing and stuff like that. A little hurtful for my wife, though.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's part of human nature. Like we develop bonds, and when the bond gets broken, we we experience like a kind of grief or sadness.
Yeah.
And you can do that with objects or people or any kinds of thing.
Yes, it's inconvenient to vote. CW, when you become a dad, as I think you ought to, because I think you'd be a great dad, you'll find that taking time to go to the school or whatever place that they have to vote. In my neighborhood, the people at the voting places aren't always the most competent people in terms of being able to read.
Those poll
something
workers
goes wrong, like a machine's not working properly, they don't always know what to do. So yeah, it's like, and then I got to get back to my kids.
Yeah. I think the last time I went, I had a video, I had the camera out and I was recording, and it was there's lines. I said, I think we're gonna not vote. There's just so many lines. It's not that important.
Yeah. We did have it so I didn't in the mayoral election, so I didn't vote this last week. Because I was planning to vote the week before, but our alderman, the way he wins elections is by getting everybody thrown off the ballot.
Okay.
Well, about a week before the election, somebody had sued and had won to get their name back on the ballot. So they temporarily stopped voting in my ward so that they could add this guy's name to the ballot. And by the time I was available to vote again, I had to go to Grand Rapids. And so I didn't vote. But the guy that got on the ballot, he only had a week that people could vote for him, and he actually got 25% of the vote, which I was impressed with.
Yeah, I tried to connect with probably like 2019, maybe 2018. I connected with open source election technology, and I was attempting to volunteer, but that fell through. It's we could figure out how to do elections and do them well, but that would not serve the interest of the people in positions of power. So
yeah, then I have to go find a mailbox. CW, you may again, when you have kids, you'll see how motivated you are to do a lot of these things.
I don't trust our systems.
Why on earth wouldn't you trust them?
There's this thing called a human.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that gets me, right? It's like, if you don't trust things, all of a sudden you must be a conspiracy theorist. Now, it is possible. I acknowledge that it's possible that there aren't a whole lot of inconsistencies in our voting system. Sure, that's possible. Knowing what we know about human beings, highly unlikely. Now, to what degree that is, I don't know. But it's one of those where I am open to the possibility that it could be highly corrupted, and it might be a little bit lower, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I mean, just simply, I ran tests that proved that it did not work as good as I know how to create it, such that it would work better. Yeah. And I have no capability to actually improve it. Right. That's just the situation I find myself in.
Yeah. And when you're in Chicago and you're going against this, machine that's here, I mean, it's really tough to be motivated to participate when you know that it's skewed. And it's kind of common knowledge in Chicago. Everybody knows that it's pretty messed up in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, parallel government is interesting to me. So, like, there's nothing stopping people from volunteering to take on the responsibility that those who are elected should take on, and then going and providing services, right? So it doesn't have to be that you get elected through the system that exists in order for people to participate and be of service in order to do the function that that representative or system should be doing. Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's kind of, to a certain degree, my idea of, like, where I've got my development company, is that housing issues in our community, it's a big thing. It's a big issue that a lot of people are concerned about. And how do they voice their concerns? At community meetings. They'll say during elections, vote like this, vote for more affordable housing, do this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, what if I raise some investor money, buy some homes, renovate them to somebody's liking, and sell it to them for the price that they are willing to pay? And that's how I start to correct like some of the housing issues in my community, because I live here and I feel like I should have some responsibility in what happens in my community, outside of complaining to somebody else who doesn't actually care at the same level that I say that I do.
Right.
But it's interesting to me how few people are interested in going down that pathway.
It's it's easier to like shirk personal responsibility. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's just an easier move. And so it's helpful for that. I would call it laziness if you believe that these other people are responsible. If you all of a sudden believe that you're responsible, then that's a little bit uncomfortable, because now you have to you have a lot of things that you might have to change about yourself.
Yeah. CW, Fleabus is trying to find you.
It'd be cool if it showed you where they are. So like when you flashed the card up, it could say from Randos United or from
I would imagine CW's on my YouTube channel, but I could be wrong about that. I mean, because I know that he subscribes to my channel.
Yeah.
He's one of my few subscribers.
I'm subscribed.
You're subscribed. You're one of the few. You CW. I mean, I forget. I don't even remember how many I have.
So I'm not subscribed to Jordan Peterson. I'm not subscribed to Joe Rogan, but I'm subscribed to Mo and Randos United.
I feel very special.
Well, I mean, it's not a minor thing. Like, why do people pay attention to Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson and Fox News, or name your character? Why are people doing it? So
yeah, I actually don't subscribe to a lot at all. Period. Mainly because I haven't quite figured out how to make that decision. like what is the criteria for me actually subscribing?
Yeah. Well, you could, for example, go test out a channel and then try to provide some feedback in the channel and see if you get any response.
Yeah.
Or you could attempt to send an email or get in touch, right? And if you can't get in touch with them, then there's no way for you to provide feedback to them, and so you can't participate at that point. So that's kind of the way. That's like the first kind of test.
Yeah, that's probably it. Because for me, I don't always interact with videos. Like, I just watch them. I unless something like pisses me off, then I might leave a comment, or something really sticks out to me. I'm like, oh, that's a really good thing, and I might post a comment. But that's very rare.
I pay attention to climbers, Adam Andra, Magnus Metbo. Who's that? Who's the best female climber in the world? It'll come to me. But there's I pay attention to things like that where I don't expect them to respond to me. But yeah, if it's in the realm of talking about like religion and politics, it's like I don't want to just pay attention to that. I want to actually try to participate in it.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, it's just weird because for me, my whole idea of viewing still comes from like my youth watching TV. It's like
right.
What I contribute to in terms of conversations usually something more embodied. Like this whole having a conversation on the computer, still very new to me.
Yeah.
It freaks my wife out a little bit. She's like, these things will be on YouTube for like forever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm okay with that.
That's part of the plan. So when eventually the artificial intelligence will go crawl through all of the data and we'll be able to say, here's Mo.
Yeah.
We need to do it, whatever it is.
Yeah. Let's do it, Mo.
No, it's more like the idea there is you could say you could actually say who should be on your board for your organization, and then you
Mm.
could crawl through all the transcripts of all this little corner, for example, and then you could you'd have your selection criteria, right? All this
Mhm.
data, and you would end up highlighting names. Right?
Huh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. So right now I have 2 confirmed board members.
Okay.
In order to incorporate, I need 3. So I'm still waiting on the 3rd one. I have a few people I'm waiting to hear responses for, and then I have like 4 lists of people that I still need to touch base with that have been given me by different parties. Because I talk to people, I'm like, oh, who do you think would be good for this board? They give me a list and another list, and I talk to those people. I'm like, who do you think would be good for the board?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, try this person and this person. So
Yeah.
at one point, I'll have the 3, and I'll incorporate, and then we'll start running from there. But
Cool. Yeah. You just have to. Yeah, I don't know. It would be nice if people who are interested would raise their hands. What kind of people are you interested in interviewing, for example?
basically just people that are recommended to me.
Yeah. Right.
And then if I can get in touch with those people, some of them just haven't responded to me. They're probably busy. They don't know who I am. But
Yeah.
if they do respond to me and we talk, then I kind of say, okay, is this somebody that I can work with? Is this somebody I think has a skill set that will be valuable to the board? Or is this somebody that I think the organization can benefit? Then I don't really want them on the board because I want to start utilizing the organization to benefit whatever they're doing. And I'd prefer them to be somebody like that. Like, for example, Sartori, Michael.
Right.
I want to start utilizing some of the network and stuff to help. I don't want him to be on the board because I want him to continue focusing on what he's doing. And I want us to, as an organization, to figure out how to continue to enable him and benefit the work that he's doing.
Okay.
And I've told him that. I told him, I just love the idea of what you're doing. I want you to focus there. And I want us to be able to help you with that.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of categories I put people in. If I think they're good for the board, I'll say, hey, I think you might be good for the board. What do you think? CW told me no. And a few people have told me no. And I appreciate them saying no. Just not something, for various reasons. They don't want that role.
Right.
They want to support. They just don't want that role.
Yeah, I mean, that's the how much responsibility do you want, right? Which is, it's nice if you explicitly you say, I don't want the extra responsibility. But yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing is that, like, yeah, the question for me would be how many people actually are willing to take on that responsibility. Like, it seems like there's just a lot of people who play audience who don't want to take on responsibility, but
and there's some people who have already taken on other responsibilities.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, they always say about 20% of people do like 80% of the work. And so it's like some people, it's like we're already contributing in this way and this way and this way. I'm not ready to take on another thing just yet. But yeah, there are a lot of people that are watching. And to a certain degree, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Is we're trying to be a benefit to those that are watching. So for those that just want to watch and are just there still, I'm kind of okay with that. And hopefully eventually you'll get involved in something that can either be a part of this or something that we can encourage and continue to lift up.
So I just was reminded again of I'd mentioned the flat earther story and the guy saying, even if I knew the earth wasn't flat, I'd still want to keep the organization together. It's like, so it sounds like the organization is here for the audience, like for the community or something like that. Okay.
For the benefit of the community, and not just, so the benefit of the whole community to a certain degree. Sure, I can see that, but a benefit for certain people in the community who want to do things and need help.
So,
but some people in the community don't really want to do anything.
So there's an event coming up, and I don't know a lot about it, and it's occurred to me, it's like, well, is there a place where I can learn about the event quickly to have all the information I need? Right. I'm in the information technology.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that come to mind for me when I think of how people can try to be of service. So it's kind of like dog fooding. It's like if I'm interested in this thing and I don't want to have to go search everywhere for it, my first thought is, well, maybe there could be one resource where I can
Mm-hmm.
go and find out all the information I need. But yeah, that's the kind of thing I know how to do, right?
You want to be on my board?
Well, I don't need to be on the board. It's just that, like this one event, like I would be willing to help, create a static website, for
Mm-hmm.
example, that has links to all the relevant information
Yeah.
about
And we've
what
talked
is the
about this
event and
before,
where
right?
is it.
Like eventually, once I have this organization incorporated, I do plan to come to you for a lot of that help because I
Yeah.
think that is extremely helpful. Which event are you referencing right now?
Well, I've heard something about May and I've heard something about Chino,
Yes.
right?
So there's an event in Chino. I did find a website with some of the information because, yeah, I had the same issue. Like, where do I know that there's information. I plan to go to it, but it wasn't easy for me to know where to go to find the information. So yeah, May 18th through 21st is the conference. I think May 18th is mainly a paintballing day. We have a campground for those that are interested in tent camping for that weekend. I will be there, tent camping, even though I know very little about tent camping. My in-laws are letting me use a tent. We'll see how that goes. But I know that Paul and John Van Donk made a video of somebody that will be helping people find accommodations and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it would be helpful to have one location where all that stuff is together.
Right. And that's the point. So yeah, and that's the kind of problem I think that the organization could solve, right?
Yes.
Right. So
just one more board member. On that.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing is you don't have to have the board member to find the information. Like, I mean, there's nothing stopping me, for example, from going to thislittlecorner.com, trying to piece together all the information where Chino has been mentioned. And then like I recall an email address that Paul Vanderklay shared to reach out to the person who's helping to organize the Airbnb. And then Grimgriz has an email for people interested in camping.
Yeah.
And then, you've got a date range. I recall a conversation about doing some type of a pilgrimage beforehand.
Oh yeah.
So you've got a bunch of ideas that are just spread out there it's not like there's one place where you go there. It's the source of truth.
Yeah. There's not one that includes all of that, right?
Right.
Now, what would you need to do that?
It could just be a Google Doc that starts out as where you have to curate the information. Mm-hmm. Ideally, the people who are involved with planning the thing could update that Google Doc. That would just that would be something that you could share in the chat down here. A link to that Google Doc. That would be a simple way to do it without anything fancy. It would have the email addresses of the people who are responsible for a certain thing.
Yeah,
that would just be the most simple approach at first. You can take it in all kinds of directions, but that would be better than nothing. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. So yeah, with this event, I mean, the goal. Hopefully, I'm going to hear back from the few people that I've hit up. At least one of them in the next few days. We'll incorporate, and then we'll have our first meeting to kind of sort all these things out. I know, again, this is kind of, the impression I get is that this is Van Donk's baby. So he's doing a lot of that stuff. We'll try to help out best we can. If we can assist with that, we probably will. But then we will be taking some of those ideas, and then the next event that comes up, well, now we're ready to rock and roll because we have some of that feedback and some of those ideas that are ready. All right, well, I have to run. I have to get to some other work.
It was a pleasure.
I don't know if you have to get back to work, if you want to keep this going.
No, I need to get back to work.
All right. I will probably be back here same time tomorrow, but I will have to leave earlier because I have parent conferences for my kids. But I will see anybody interested tomorrow. Good talking to you, Gavin.
Good talking to you.
All right.